That's very kind. Thank you very much. I'm now going to switch gears and look at a couple of criticisms that the hardback God Delusion encountered. And I've mentioned these in the preface to the paperback, which is now just out. Interestingly, some of the strongest criticisms came from atheists who, although they don't believe themselves, believe in belief, as the philosopher Dan Dennett puts it. I'm an atheist, but I wish to dissociate myself from your shrill, strident, intemperate, intolerant, ranting language. Well, actually, if you look at the language of the God Delusion, it's rather less shrill or intemperate than we regularly take in our stride when listening to political commentators, for example, theatre critics or book critics or restaurant critics. Here are some quotes from restaurant criticisms of London restaurants in the leading papers recently. It is difficult, if not impossible, to imagine anyone conjuring up a restaurant, even in their sleep, where the food in its mediocrity comes so close to inedible. All things considered, quite the worst restaurant in London, maybe the world, serves horrendous food grudgingly in a room that is a museum to Italian waiters' taste, Kirker 1976. The worst meal I've ever eaten, not by a small margin, I mean the worst, the most unrelievedly awful. What looked like a sea mine in miniature was the most disgusting thing I put in my mouth since I ate earthworms at school. Well, insulting a restaurant might seem trivial compared to insulting God, but restaurateurs and chefs really exist, and they have feelings to be hurt. Whereas blasphemy, as the witty bumper sticker puts it, is a victimless crime. Another example. In 1915, the British Member of Parliament Horatio Bottomley recommended that after the war, if by chance you should discover one day in a restaurant you were being served by a German waiter, you will throw the soup in his foul face. If you find yourself sitting at the side of a German clerk, you will spill the inkpot over his foul head. Now that's strident and intolerant, and I should have thought ridiculous and ineffective as rhetoric, even in its own time. The British literary critic Terry Eagleton described the late Kingsley Amis, extremely distinguished novelist, as a racist, anti-Semitic bore, a drink-sodden, self-hating reviler of women, gays, and liberals. Well, I think that compares fairly well with my own beginning of chapter 2 of the God Delusion, which is the passage most often quoted as strident or shrill. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Now, that's the passage most often quoted as strident or shrill. It's not for me to say whether I succeeded, but my intention was closer to robust humor, a humorous broadside, rather than shrill polemic. I don't think words like misogynistic, infanticidal, genocidal, megalomaniacal, that doesn't sound shrill to me. Something about those long words suggests that... My wife Lala and I do a sort of double act reading from my books when they're published. And one of the things you have to do in order to warm an audience up is to get them laughing early. And so with each book we try to pick a humorous passage near the beginning, and we always pick that passage for the God Delusion. It sort of gets a laugh. As this one is another one, which at least was my intention to be humorous, about Our Lady of Fatima. There you see some typical examples of Catholic kitsch. This is a quote from the God Delusion now. Pope John Paul II created more saints than all his predecessors of the past several centuries put together, and he had a special affinity with the Virgin Mary. His polytheistic hankerings were dramatically demonstrated in 1981 when he suffered an assassination attempt in Rome and attributed his survival to intervention by Our Lady of Fatima. A maternal hand guided the bullet. One cannot help wondering why she didn't guide it to miss him altogether. Others might think the team of surgeons who operated on him for 6 hours deserved at least a share of the credit. But perhaps their hands too were maternally guided. The relevant point is that it wasn't just Our Lady who, in the Pope's opinion, guided the bullet, but specifically Our Lady of Fatima. Presumably Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Medjugorje, Our Lady of Akita, Our Lady of Zaitun, Our Lady of Garabandal, and Our Lady of Knock were busy on other errands at the time. I think that's quite funny too. Pure Monty Python. Nevertheless, it's quite true that many people do feel very strongly about their faith and very offended if you insult it. We've come to expect never to be offended. What you say is offensive to me. Let's raise our consciousness. What's so special about religious arguments that they should be immune to exactly the same kind of rational discussion as political or any other kind of arguments?